Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about The Old Man, the Jeff Bridges-led spy drama currently airing its second season on FX. And I'm happy to welcome back to the show Propmaster Scott Buckwald. Scott, it's great to see you again.
It is always great to see you, and I'm very glad to be here. And it's only taken 2 years to get back here to talk about season 2 of The Old Man.
That is exactly the point I was going to make. Yeah, this one's been a long time coming. For listeners who may not be aware, FX shows are also available on Hulu and Disney Plus, usually a day after airing on FX. Our conversation today may contain spoilers for season 1 and the first half of season 2, but we're not going to share any plot points for episodes that have yet to air. Now, as you alluded to, Scott, longtime listeners may also remember that we talked about the first season of Old Man back in the fall of 2022. It was season 13, episode 10 of the podcast, but we primarily focused on two major challenges you faced to complete that season. First, COVID wrecked your schedule and everything, locations, timing, the whole bit with COVID. But then second, Jeff Bridges was suffering some serious health issues. To start us off, Scott, give us some background on that and how it played out with the scheduling and filming of season 2.
Season 2, we went into it with the understanding that Jeff was not going to be able to work the super long days that are pretty typical to a film set, that we were working a schedule that would really accommodate Jeff's health. And believe me when I tell you, I was so happy how great he looked, how great his attitude was. I mean, he was back and ready to fight. And it made me just personally really happy to see how well he was doing when we all came back for season 2. But we did take that into consideration moving forward. Otherwise, it was starting like every season does, with the best of hopes of it going all the way through and everything getting done in a most orderly of manner. But once again, fate was going to throw us a different angle. And after maybe halfway through the season, we got hit with the strike, and that shut us down once again. So, when we started the show, when we started season 2, we started with that feeling of we're going at it all again. We're starting fresh. We went through Jeff's illnesses. We went through COVID. We went through all the ups and downs that we felt season 1 was plagued by, that no other season could ever be plagued by. And I guess like any ship setting out to sea, you kind of hope that the bad storm is not going to happen. The one thing I will say, from the producers to the crew, it was a very tight group. Everybody was extremely supportive of one another. And I've been doing this long enough to say that I've been doing this long enough. So going into the season,
You are the old man of this interview for sure, Scott. So
it starts to happen to the best of us. And I really feel, at this point in my career, I feel like I'm at the top of my career. I feel like I'm bringing the old man years and years of experience, and it really helps. And it also makes me appreciate the show that much more. Because one thing I'll say is I've been through the good and I've been through the bad. And honestly, I couldn't have asked for a better environment. From the crew that I had, to the producers I worked with, to the actors that I worked alongside. It was really that experience that makes me feel really good, not just about myself, but once again makes me validate why I went into this most crazy of careers.
now, Scott, I recall from our last conversation that one of the big changes that COVID wrought was there was a lot of plans to shoot in Morocco, but you ended up building sets and these Afghan villages here in the United States. Was that the basis then for shooting for season 2, or were there new logistical and travel challenges that had to be incorporated from scratch?
Uh, some of that might be a little more privy to the producers, because in season 2, we do a lot of globe trotting, but the globe trotting was all done within a tank of gas of Los Angeles. So, and it really is, it's the reason that the film business came to LA, because all of that could be done here or it could be done abroad. But we did have the Afghan village from last season, and we utilized that to its full extent. And it is amazing because I've had people, friends of mine, who have seen the show, and they've asked me, what was it like traveling to Afghanistan? And I said, well, I didn't travel to Afghanistan. Originally, the plans were traveling to Morocco, and we didn't travel to Morocco. We ended up traveling to Santa Clarita. And that build was just phenomenal. And the way it was dressed and decorated, I don't want to keep using superlative after superlative, but it really was incredible. And it's amazing to lose yourself on those kind of sets because you're walking down those streets and you could look a full 360 around, and no matter where you look, you feel like you're in Afghanistan. And when it all comes together, when people are all propped and all the actors are dressed, and there's carts on the street and food cooking on the street and people walking around, you are really getting a sensory overload. And if you want to be a full film geek like I am, it is a way of doing all of that. You work on a movie, if it's a period film, your body is sensing what it must have been like to be walking down the streets in 1940. And I've had that privilege, and I never grow tired of it, and I never grow unappreciative of it. That these shows are putting me in environments that I would never have had the opportunity to be put in. I don't know if that's over answering the question or not. If you're editing this and you want to simplify it, yes, we shot in Santa Clarita and we built the entire weekend village.
I'm doing a lot less editing these days, Scott. I think that's how I've adapted over the last couple of years. And to that point, I have to confess, when we did the first episode, we talked for a while about a bunch of stuff. I did edit it down to really focus on the challenge issues that we talked about.
Sure.
So a lot of what you said about props ended up on the cutting room floor, which means it will be fresh again today. This was a prop heavy show. You had a ton of work on props, introduced us to the challenges that the old man from the start till now have caused for your department.
Challenge is a really odd term, and I guess it could be interpreted in so many ways. There's good challenges and bad challenges, and I think when it's a bad challenge, it becomes excruciating and the work feels like it's never going to end. But when it's a good challenge, it feels like you don't want the work to end. It becomes that trip to the amusement park that you just wish would go on all day. And there would be times where I would have some personal time with some of the producers, and I would talk to them, and I would just tell them how much I feel like this is my show and how much I'm enjoying being here. And I don't want it to come across like I'm trying to just invite myself into being called back next season, because it really is true. So it was a challenge as far as the amount of props we had. But then again, the challenge is softened by the fact that my budget was in consideration to the amount of props I had. The producers, the line producer, and UPM, Judd and John, were both very supportive as far as giving me the extra labor that I needed. If we had a day when we had a lot of working weapons, I brought in all the extra armors I needed. There was never a time when I needed to go to the producer's desk and feel like I was representing myself in the court of props. If I said I needed it, and I would at the same point, I never misused their trust. I was never buying things I didn't need just to spend the money. So it was mutual trust on both sides, and it really works hand in hand, which probably gets back to where I said we were a very supportive group. We were all making the same project. But, again, it never gets rid of the fact this was not a contemporary show where we just go to Target and create, a daily slice of life. And one thing that might get lost in the show, because there's a lot of military, there's a lot of spy, a lot of the show is period. There's a big portion of this show that takes place, in the 80s and the 90s and in different time. So shooting it in a world that takes place in Afghanistan at that time period doesn't make it the same kind of pop culture going back in time as if we were shooting it, say, New York in the 1980s. But still, we had to look for weapons and different devices, and we still have to approach it as a period show. So I was able to have to prop period as well as contemporary, and that's a joy. There was also a lot of times just in the sheer number. when we're shooting an Afghanistan village and we have 80 extras and none of them could be sent out in front of the camera the way they came dressed from home. So everybody has to have some props in their hand. Everybody has to have something. And those are days when I would bring in extra people. We had to have an extra truck when we were shooting the background. We just had so much stuff.
Tell me more about shooting Afghanistan for the 1980s. Not just, again, because you've got period weapons, but you've got Russian influence. The entire challenges of bringing that together. Go a little deeper with me on that.
I always react to what's given to me. So when I'm reading through the extras breakdown, I'll handle accordingly if there's Russian soldiers. And we did have scenes with a Russian mess hall. We not only had to have the appropriate food, which I did have to research because they were fed differently than American troops would be fed. The gear they have is different, even their mess kits. Something as simple as getting a 1980s Russian mess kit is not the same as going and getting a 1980s American mess kit. We had to remake MREs. And to do that, I was able to get some authentic Russian MREs. It really helps as well that my prop coordinator, Marina, is Russian speaking and served time in the Russian military. So I had built in research sitting right over there. And that was great. We made a lot of Russian canned food, and she helped me with the labels. We were able to recreate a lot of product because, again, even going on eBay, there's certain things that you just can't find. And if you're lucky, you could find a couple pictures of something to give you research. But that's a fun challenge. It's that kind of challenge when you make it and you're looking at it, you're going, well, I actually made this. And I love that. I still get off on it's like when you're a little kid and you build a model and you show your parents and it looks as good as the model on the box. What a great feeling that is. And when you show the producer something and you just get this smile because you've presented something beyond what they had hoped for. And the producers were incredibly, incredibly encouraging with that. I was never shot down. It was always a pleasure. And it's probably something I'm going to say more than you're going to want to hear over the course of this.
In fact, what you're hearing at home, I've probably edited half of it, audience. So it's probably, whatever you're
right.
hearing was probably twice as much.
But there's this feeling of when I said to the producer, it felt like my show. You take pride in it. And I take pride in everything I do, but there are those shows for one reason or another, and it's not always just the subject matter. I mean, I've worked on shows where I was certainly not their audience demographic, but for one reason or another, it just stole a piece of my heart and you fall in love with it. And it is someplace that I'm proud to say that the prop department has been going in the last 5 to 10 years, where we are an artistic department. And it's not just a matter of getting shopping bags and just technical things, that we are creating art and it is an artistic department. And I'm very glad to see that because, in a way, there's the costume designer, there's the production designer. And I'd like to think that the prop master is the production designer of the prop department.
Scott, I want to go a little deeper on the issue of weapons on set. Since the issues that happened on Rust, I'm curious if in the current environment and atmosphere, with additional scrutiny, both on set and from offset, if anything is different or anything needs to be done, just again to reassure people that a show with this many weapons, everybody is safe.
It's the world we live in. The one thing I told everybody right from the beginning is I'm not changing a thing in the way I do stuff. I've been handling weapons for a long time, and any professional prop master does it just as good as I do. And there are people who know weapons a lot better than me, and there are people who don't work with weapons at all who would bring in somebody like me or somebody like some of the people I brought in. What Russ did is it kind of brought the subject of movie weapons to more of a public forum. That when you know how the magic is done and you start looking up the magician's sleeve, it brings forward a bunch of questions. And before then, we went to set, we did our weapons, I always cleared weapons, and the actors always felt safe. Producers always felt safe. I have a very good reputation with weapons. And like I said, all of my fellow prop masters have just as good a reputation. In the professional world of prop mastering, it's what we do. It's what a good effects coordinator does. It's what a good stunt coordinator does. But we were put to the point where now people were looking at us differently. I certainly address it. I mean, I know it's the question in the room, and I think now when we do these things, there's a little bit more scrutiny, and you can't avoid it. You know, you want to have something good come out of every tragedy, and if there is a little more scrutiny, the better. You can't have too much safety. I think the one thing that I is a shame is that there are sets that are not allowing weapons, practical weapons. That was not the case with the old man. Jeff Bridges was asked if he was comfortable using weapons, and he said, as long as I'm handling them, meaning I'm supervising it, I can't always be the physical person handling it, but as long as I was handling the weapons, he was comfortable with it. And the studio went with that. I certainly had the support of our producers, the line producer I worked with on Queen of the South, Judd Rea, and he brought me on this show. And we certainly had quite a few weapons on Queen of the South as well. So I didn't want to let it go by without anything being said. We did make sure to just acknowledge it. And I want people, crew members, grip and electrics, camera people who are sometime down barrel of a weapon, just to know that none of this has escaped me. And I've always made this public from my earliest days of doing weapons. We always show the weapons, we clear them. We show them to everybody who's going to be in front of it, not just the actors. We'll show the camera people, the DP. And I always say, if at any time over the course of this, anybody wants to have a second look, I will do it. Always happy to do that. With the actors, we made very sure that all the actors were not only trained on the weapons, but that they handled them before the scene, because we were using a lot of exotic weapons. You know, we had Russian weapons, we had some Chinese weapons. We didn't fire just the same old shotgun and Beretta. We definitely taxed the shelves a little bit. The other thing that's very important, and this is more on the political end, I would always explain to the actors, I am approaching this as a professional prop master and as a weapons handler, that in my personal life, I don't have a particular interest in weapons. I don't collect weapons. I'm not a member of the NRA. I'm not trying to use weapons on a movie set to somehow further a political objective that I have. I'm not trying to do this as a way to promote guns in society. It is strictly an artistic reason. Case in point, and you'll see this in one of the episodes, we had to fire a 50 caliber machine gun mounted on top of a Humvee. Very easy to have done all of that CGI. In talking to the producers, I said the only way to do this is with 50 caliber blanks. And it was a big deal. The blanks are extremely expensive. I think it's about $5 a round. They're all belt fed. I did have to bring in somebody who was more expert at that. That kind of is beyond what I normally do. It's still done under my direct supervision, but I bring in somebody to man just a 50 caliber. And we had machine guns. We must have had 30 various machine guns, handguns, shotguns, everything in this battle scene. Anyway, we had a lot of studio execs that day, all at Video Village, watching this. Everyone wanted to see the 50 caliber in action. After the scene, I went up to the producers, and these were producers that I didn't know. These were studio execs, and I just said, what did you think of it?" And they were like kids. They're like, "Oh my God, that was amazing! I felt it in my chest when that gun was going off. Man, I felt boom, 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 boom in my chest. It was just incredible." And I looked at him. I said, "You can't do that with CGI." My point was, it gave the actor something to work off of. It's not just seeing it from the audience standpoint. When the actor fires anything from a small caliber handgun all the way up to a 50 caliber, it gives them something to react to. It really is the difference of, if the actor is going to eat pizza, you give them pizza. You don't give them fake food and have them turn off later and spit it out, or CGI food going in their mouths. It's part of what the actor reacts to. It builds his world. It makes the actor feel like that character when they're holding that weapon. So my goal with Rust was I didn't want to see an end of theatrical firearms. It would be easier for me. It's certainly easier to bring in a bunch of non-firing replicas and hand them out, not have to go through all of the pageantry of bringing in real weapons. I don't have to spend the money on blanks. I don't have to bring in as many people. I don't have to worry about misfires. It's just bring in the guns. But at the same point, there's something lost to the audience. And that is why I really try to make it now a point to show how valuable the weapons are, and that CGI and AI can't take the place of everything. And I realize we're moving forward into a new world, and I'm not going to be the guy who tries to prevent the gas stations from coming around as the blacksmith shops are going away. We're entering a new world, and there'll be those of us who adapt to it and those of us who fade out and die. But certain aspects, like weapons, I don't think that just because they can be replaced, they should be replaced. And I didn't want Rust to be that catalyst where people act in fear and say, well, it's safer not to use them.
Now, Scott, speaking of weapons, before we started recording, you did tease a story about the publicity shoot that was done for the teaser trailer, which I'm sure
Okay.
even if people haven't seen the show, they've seen that trailer. It's gotten quite a bit of airtime. I think it even showed up on the sports app that I watched. I think they sponsored that as well.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere.
I've even seen it as a trailer before the coming attractions in movie theaters, which to me is always a treat.
It shows that the studio has a lot of belief in the show. But talk to me about that. You said something about replica versus rubber guns, and just curious. Tell me the background of shooting those publicity trailers.
What that was the teaser is done by a different production company. We don't take time off on our regular shooting day to do those. They bring in a company that I don't know if it's hired through Fox or what the pathway is, but there's another production company. They bring in their own camera people, they bring in their own producer, they have their own budget, and they bring in a lot of their own crew. They do look to props in particular because we did the weapons, we hold on to the hero props, and they need us for that. The producers who were doing this were not in the know of what our on-set old man producers. They don't know me. They know absolutely nothing. And they're also not the kind of producers that have been doing a big, heavy gun show. So they came into it with a little more of the prejudice that was spawned by Rust. And they were very afraid to have weapons. There was a lot of explanation that a replica cannot be turned into a firing gun. There's a lot of I know in talking to some of my assistants, they would roll their eyes and go, "What's these people's problem?" And I don't want to diminish. It's not their problem. It's their concern. And honestly, it's kind of comical amongst those in the know at the time when you get a bunch of producers you've never worked with, and they're asking me if there's any way a rubber gun or a replica gun could be tampered with and made real. I mean, it sounds kind of laughable when you know that, but they're asking good questions, and any question deserves an answer. And they were willing to listen to us. For the previews that you're talking about, there was no weapons fire needed. So we didn't need to bring them blanks. We didn't need to go through those levels, but they did need to have weapons on the set. And they were very concerned about it. And the one thing I would urge other prop masters is to handle that with the care that it deserves. That as comical as it might sound at the time, to the point where like you almost want to just kind of laugh and go, who are these people? They're people doing their job. They're people who are not privy to what you know. And if you handle it correctly, hopefully moving forward, it will be something they realize that is handled with the care. It does get a little frustrating because they're looking to not have to do something they're not familiar with. So the whole time they're trying to get me to use rubber guns because they understand rubber guns and they realize the rubber gun can't fire. My concern is that rubber guns are good for background and are good for in motion stunt use. But for hero photographs or something that's going to be close up, I want to use either real or replica. And I'm lucky that through ISS, where we have been getting all of our weapons, that their replicas are indistinguishable from the real ones. And I told them that creatively and artistically, and to support the benefit of the show, I want to go with all replicas, and that the person I'm sending is trained in weapons, and you have no concern. You should have no concern that the weapons could be tampered with. I said they look real, but I said these are not decommissioned weapons that could be recommissioned. These weapons look real on the outside, but they have none of the mechanics inside. They don't have a place for the mechanics to be put in. I said they are no more likely to be turned into real weapons than the rubber guns are. I think that probably before Rust, they might not even have questioned that. It would have just been bring what you need, and we still would have gone through all the safety procedures, but it wouldn't have met with so much uh, introduction of the subject. That's now part of my job.
We've talked about how Jeff Bridges was really a driving force on both these seasons. And despite having the health issues he did, in the first season, John Lithgow, who is another major character, he's doing a lot of office work and more standard sort of film type sets. But in the second season, he's in the shit. And I'm curious how he took to being on set in some of these more active environments, and also how the two of them were together.
There's nothing more enjoyable than watching somebody who's at the top of their craft do their craft. And I don't aspire to be an actor, and I've worked along many of them. Watching Jeff and John together, it's just amazing. It's awe-inspiring. The two of them have such natural chemistry together, and it was wonderful seeing where John's character elevated to. I remember at the end of season one when they're finally brought together and they walk off into the sunset together. I mean, literally, they're walking down this runway, and it just reminded me of the end of Casablanca when Humphrey Bogart, when Rick and Louis are walking away together, and Rick goes, "Louis, this seems like the beginning of a beautiful friendship." It totally had that feeling to me. And in Casablanca, that's where the movie ends. In The Old Man, that's where season two begins. So in the show, remember that even though in season one we don't see the two of their characters together, in the years prior to that, they were once together. Season one has them many years after the fact. Season two reunites them. So in season two, they're not meeting each other for the first time. They're bringing together a certain odd couple relationship, because even back in the day, Jeff Bridges' character was more the soldier, the action hero, where John Lithgow's character was always more of the brains of the outfit. We've already seen it at this point. In the first episode, Jeff Bridges kills somebody, and I think John Lithgow says something to the effect, he has this moment where he goes, "You have to stop killing people without asking me first." And it's this serious line, but you could handle it as a real Oscar and Felix comedic moment. I love it. It's one of those things that I could watch the same episode over and over again just to see their performances together.
If people are inspired to watch the episodes over and over again, talk to me about some props that maybe people might have missed on a first time through, either because it was in the midst of an action scene or on a second viewing you'd like people to know.
As a prop master, a lot of times some of my favorite props are the background props. Just as much work is put into creating a background prop, really, as creating any of the hero foreground props. The foreground props, the hero props, are what's always seen. And those are the obvious ones where people will always ask me, where did you find this? How did you make this? But if in episode one, we see the guys in this tea house, and the production designer, Giles, designed an unbelievable set. To complement it, we had everybody there reading newspapers. So I created from scratch the appropriate newspapers. We had a technical advisor to make sure that the words I put in were spelled correctly, that the because you can't always use Google Translator. It's very stiff. So we worked with them. But it's little things like that. And when you watch the episode, you probably won't notice it because the newspaper doesn't directly move the plot forward, but it does add to the ambiance of what's going on. The teacups and tea services that between my shopper and the set decorator put in are beautiful. When we're there on the set, we could really appreciate them. It's a lot of those little details. Sometimes the Afghan license plates on the cars are little touches, and it's not particularly difficult to do, but it does just add something to it. Uh, the various usage of using satellite phones as opposed to just cell phones, because we're in an area where cell phones won't be any good. We have to think of that. Okay, here's something that I had to do a little research on, and I was, very happy with it. In the beginning, we see when they reach into the truck, and this is in the first episode, and they need to do GPS. Well, a satellite phone can't do GPS. You can't get Google Maps on a satellite phone. What I found out was there is a satellite attachment that you could take a smartphone, plug the smartphone into the attachment, and essentially turn the smartphone into a satellite phone. So what we do is we see the regular Google phone resting in this attachment, and the attachment gives the phone satellite service. So they're able to bring up maps. Now, most people would not have known that. We probably could have just used a regular smartphone and shown the Google map on it, and probably never a question would have been asked. It's nice to do that. I'm glad that when I researched it, I found out that there was such a device, and it's great to bring that to the table. That's something fun to look for. Just all the usage. There's a lot of stunt use with knives. Tim Connolly, who's probably, if not the best stunt coordinator I've ever worked with, certainly as good as the best ones I've ever worked with. I just loved working with Tim. And Tim would be here on my prop trailer, which is where I am now, and we would go over the various needs of what the knife would be. And it's not just bring in a real one, bring in a retractable. In fact, we didn't use any retractable knives because they look terrible. That is someplace where CGI does help. What we would do is we would have a real knife. We would have a real knife with the blade dulled down. We would have a rubber double of the knife to use in the fight scenes. And then when the stabbing is done, we would have a knife where all but a little bit past the hilt was cut off. And when someone would get stabbed, CGI would draw the blade disappearing into the person.
Wow.
That is where CGI is an improvement, because otherwise the only thing we're doing is shooting it from an angle where the blade is not seen or using a retractable knife. And in today's world of high definition, you'll see it retract. You can't hide that. And it's just it looks better the way we did it. And the challenge for myself and Tim was not to keep using the same kind of knife every time. Because one military knife looks very similar to another. One thing that I would say to Tim is I don't want it to look like I'm just going to the truck and getting the knife that we used in season 1, episode 7. And Tim was great with working that out and just always trying to not compromise the fight he wants to have, and not me having to compromise by just using, even if not literally the same knife, a knife that really just looks the same. So it's keeping that fresh. Okay, without giving spoilers, there's props where Jeff has to build it on set, where he has to go shopping for the parts. So for that, we start with drawings supplied to me by the production designer. And then what I need to do is then build something that looks like his drawings that the showrunner likes. Then, after we get all that done, it can't be all manufactured, because it's very easy to bring it to a prop manufacturer and have them laser cut everything and build everything. But I need to be able to do it with parts that really exist, so that when we see Jeff going into an electronics store and taking this piece and that piece, I need to be able to reverse engineer it as well. So that is a pleasure. And Jeff is amazing with that. even in scenes we've done, like in season one where he's cooking and he's making breakfast for him and Zoe, the approach he takes, he never just takes the food and makes it. He really appreciates the backstory and why is he making this food as opposed to making pancakes? Why is he making this? And he's not going to argue the point. It's not that he doesn't want to do it. He just wants to feel comfortable in it. And when he sits with me and we discuss this together, I feel honored that an Oscar-winning actor of his caliber wants to know what I think. And it's because of my just love for this guy. It's just always like my honor to do that, and I get a kick out of it. I also know that anything I give him, he's gonna make me look good to my peers. You'll see a scene where he has to build a piece of equipment. The amount of time Jeff and I sat down, not only did he want to know what the pieces were for and why we put each piece in, but he wanted to know from what point should he start building it. And when he's building it, should he loop this around this way or bring this piece in first? He's very exact, and it all is proof in the product he puts out at the end.
Well, there's a lot of exactness in this show overall. Folks, if you haven't watched it, you've got time to catch up before season two wraps up. Scott, is there anything you can tease us about a future for this? Are we going to see more Old Man?
I was at the premiere when season two first came out, and we are looking to do season three, notwithstanding a volcano, an earthquake, or any other kind of plague that could slow us down. Hopefully, season three is on the heels of season two. But right now, more than anything, everybody should really enjoy season two. It's everything that I love in streaming. It's no longer your grandpa's television. It's a way of seeing theatrical quality work on your home TV screen. You know, you and I have worked together doing features. I don't feel for any reason that I've had to take a come down by doing television. I think TV, even in its most simple form, could be sometimes more of a challenge than doing a feature. You know, you look at shows like Shogun and The Last of Us, all amazing, amazing shows that are right up there with The Old Man. And we're all doing these jobs that could just as easily be done for a big screen. The premiere for Old Man was on a big screen. And I felt so lucky to be able to sit in a movie theater seat and look in this dark theater and watch the old man just appear before me on this screen. It was great seeing it so big. And it was not just seeing some piece of episodic television.
Well, as you said, going to encourage people to check out the season if they haven't already. Scott, I do have one more prop related topic before we go. At the start of this season, season 20, episode 2 of the podcast, I interviewed Mike Trudell and Chris Call about the Propmasters Guild and your first ever awards ceremony, the MacGuffin Awards, which took place last month. Tell me how that went.
It was a real honor to be there. Chris Call actually said it best. I was reading a comment he had made, something to the effect of, to the rest of the world, we've now arrived. I'm kind of paraphrasing Chris, but it really is introducing us to the studio execs that were more than just a truck full of a bunch of junk that seems to make itself in front of the camera. That Variety and Deadline both did very impressive articles on the Prop Masters Awards. What it means to be a prop master, you know, in years past, we didn't know one another. I had heard of certain prop masters. I might have known them a little by reputation. But what the PMG has done was more than just give us a guild, it's brought us together physically into the same room, whether it's for an awards dinner or a social outing. And it lets you meet these people. And they're people I'm fans of. I've sat in for Chris several times on their podcast, the PMG podcast. I've played the part of Skid interviewing people. And I've interviewed different prop masters. And as I'm interviewing them, I realize I'm really fans of their work. It makes me feel, you know, when you hear musicians talk about other musicians or actors talk about other actors, it's just as impressive to hear what other prop masters say. I think the importance of the MacGuffin Awards is not simply just to even things out to give us awards too. but it's certainly nice, and there's nothing more of an honor than to be honored by your peers. But what it did do was let other people outside of our trade see how seriously we take ourselves. We had some amazing presenters. Emily Ferry received the Lifetime Achievement Award. No better person than Emily to have received the first one. Her career goes 4 decades. She is, I believe, the very first woman prop master, and she opened up this world to a lot of other women. It's just amazing. The amount of movies she's done and the films that she's done are just incredible. And when they're reading off her different achievements, you become humbled in this, and you realize we really are a part of Hollywood history. The MacGuffin Awards really sheds a lot of light on that. I was very happy that they chose Emily for her lifetime achievement, and Emily is still going strong. So it's not closing the lid on Emily by any means. And all of the people, I wasn't nominated for anything. I didn't have any shows. I was working on The Old Man all through 2023, but every person who won the award was so deserving of it. Having watched other award shows where you hear the winners go, any of those other people nominated would have been equally deserving of that award. It always felt like a line to me. Like, well, of course you're supposed to say that. But when I heard people say that during their acceptance speeches, it really hit home, because I'm thinking, if I had been nominated for Old Man and I had won, any of the shows that I were up against were just as powerful as the job I had done, and any of those prop masters would have been just as deserving. So that was education for me. I really found the definition of the phrase that you really are in good company. I think the MacGuffin Awards, it's here to stay, and whether it eventually introduces us as an Oscar or Emmy category is almost secondary, because I can't imagine anything greater than having people who really know what we do present an award. Getting an award and a pat on your back from your peers, to me, is the ultimate, because they know what it takes.
And even though you've got this other award show now, Scott, you're still going to come back and we're going to do our Oscars episode again come next year, right? So, okay, good.
Of course.
Want to make sure I didn't want to be jealous. Scott, on that note, I think we'll call it a wrap here. It's so great having you back on the show.
I always love being here. How long have we known each other now? You and I met, 2001?
Oh my God. No, 2000, I think. I think it was 2000. Right. So we're coming up on our 25th.
That's unreal.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. You'll find my contact info on our website, belowtheline1word.biz. That's B-I-Z. You'll also find past episodes and links to all of our social media, so check it out. Tell me, Scott, where next are we going to see your work?
The Old Man. It's been my life for 5 years now. Everything I've done prior to that has already now aired. So The Old Man is what I have going on, and hopefully there's more to follow.
Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all our listeners, I appreciate you. The Below the Line logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Please rate us wherever you get your podcasts and tell your friends. This is the last episode of season 20, but I've got a bunch of fun episodes lined up for season 21, and the break should be short. Please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and join us again soon here at Below the Line.
It's very hard when you just, when you ask, what props should we look out for?
I should have told you we were going to talk about props on this one, Scott. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. That's
after
last time, you once burned, twice warned.
Right. It's just thinking of particular props